right, I think we're on. So we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order then. This is Eric Sittler. Eric is the law director for Sumner County. I think Eric has a couple things he wants to go over just before we really get going.
Yeah, I've got really nothing to do with this, nor do I choose to. I just want to go over some of the formalities of having an ad hoc committee and just some of the things to be looking out for as y'all move on. I'm taking it under assumption that this is really the first time y'all have gathered to even create a concept of what you want to accomplish, which is great. Some of the things you're going to want to think about is you're going to need a chairman and a vice chairman, so that's going to need to be voted on by the members of this body. So be thinking about that. If you want it to continue with Judge Howard being chairman, that's fine. We just have to get a tabulated vote for it. The other thing is these meetings have to be recorded. They have to be noticed. And whatever your agenda is, to include any attachments of stuff you're going to discuss will need to be posted to the website as well. Those generally the agendas need to be posted 48 hours before. The notices themselves, our rule of thumb is about 72 hours. The law is not very specific on that. They'd love for us to be creative with that. What's sufficient public notice? But 72 hours seems to make everybody happy. There will be a sign-in sheet usually you'll have for recognition of the public, and obviously take them in. The purpose of public comment is for exactly that, the public to comment. They are not to engage in the conversation at the table. They're out of line if they do that. They can't ask questions, so there's no back and forth with the public comment, so just keep that in mind too. When in doubt, if the standing rules and procedures for the county don't apply, then it's all Robert's Rules of Order. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with that or not, but it's a fun read if you ever decide to sit down one weekend. The election of officers, I highly recommend you go ahead and knock that out next meeting. In the interim, we'll just rely on Judge Howard as being chairman, and I'll let him run everything from this point forward from the invocation on. Any questions you have when I'm at the table, though, you are more than welcome to ask me. I'll give you any kind of legal guidance I can. If there's a need for what's called an executive session where the public has to leave because of discussion of pending litigation or stuff that could turn into litigation, you do have that opportunity as well. I don't go to all of the committee and board meetings. What I rely on is somebody on that specific committee or board to let me know, hey, we may have some legal issues we need to vet with you, and then by all means I'll try to be there. The problem I run into is this turns into a night job for me. If I attend I was here till 7:30 last night with a special commission meeting, so I try to weigh the needs versus do I really just need to be sitting there when y'all really got nothing for me. But I will be here whenever you want. I've got a staff attorney that if I'm not available, he can be here. We do have some meetings that happen at the same time, usually not, but they're back to back enough that we're doing a lot of juggling on the meetings. So with that, I will turn it over to Judge Howard and sit here like a bump on the log unless you got a question.
All right. I guess for invocation purposes, Dr. Cleek, would you mind leading open us in prayer?
Sure. Thank you. Father, thank you for the day and privilege we had to serve this community and help people who are struggling and need help. Pray for guidance and wisdom in this meeting. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
All right. Well, for recognition of the public, there's no one that's present here that's not either part of the committee itself or a member of my staff who is present. So we'll move on then to the approval of the agenda. It's a fairly brief agenda tonight, just sort of more of an introduction than anything else. But we have a motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Okay, have a second?
Second.
Motion and second's been made. Any opposition? All right, agenda's been approved. For purposes of business, I know that several folks in here may know one another. But many of you may not. So what I'd like to do is have everybody introduce themselves and sort of your expectations for what you're hoping that we will achieve as far as our ad hoc committee to protect children. And I'm going to start down here with Becca since I know her.
I'm Becca Page. I work for the Department of Children's Services and I'm currently a team leader for Child Protective Services and have been with the department for nearly 11 years. All of my time, other than 6 months, has been in Sumner County, and I am passionate about the work that I do and passionate about protecting children. So I just hope that my expectation of this committee and this meetings is to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and get some good ideas going on not only how we can continue to protect children, but some prevention strategies that we can put in place for our community as a whole.
Okay.
My name is Logan Sorrells. I'm an attorney here in Sumner County. The majority of my practice is in the juvenile court. I handle cases involving juvenile delinquents. I represent parents involved with DCS, and also work as a guardian ad litem who represents the best interest of the children in the court throughout their court procedures. I've been an attorney for almost 3 years. Born and raised in this community, so really passionate about helping making sure that our kids in this community are safe and well cared for. And my hope throughout this committee would just be to kind of gauge a better understanding of ideas from other areas of the community. Obviously, what I'm exposed to is a lot different than what everyone else at this table is exposed to, so I'm very interested in learning kind of thoughts of everyone else in the community, and just like I said, coming up with new ways to keep our kids safe, and hopefully doing that as a preventative way instead of on the back end.
My name is Ray Cleek. I'm one of the pastors at First Baptist Hendersonville, but my primary responsibility is director of the BAB Center, which is a full-service licensed professional counseling center. We have about 1,000 sessions a month for parents, children, adults, and about 30% of our client load are children or minors, and we see them from age 3 all the way through 17, I guess, until they turn 18. And we see the most difficult cases, family issues that you can possibly imagine. And so my hope in being here is that we'll develop better strategies, understandings of how real the crisis is in our children's lives. It's very, very serious, and it's getting worse every day. And we're trying to help intervene in that and help parents to do a better job parenting and help children survive what they're going through every day. And we're there for that purpose, as well as being a minister of the church. So I opened the center 20 years ago.
My name is Eric Jackson. I'm pastor at Hendersonville Church of God, and I've been there almost 10 years, but I grew up here in Hendersonville almost all my life. We are involved, I guess, in a lot of ways. I'm just listening to how everybody's involved in some way with helping kids, and that's in the nature of that. We run Sumner County missions. We feed about anywhere from 500 to 750 people a month. And we do a lot of other missions, just individual, family, things like that, try to get people back on their feet, pay utility bills, that sort of thing. But we also, there's a lady in our church who works for Rescue One in Nashville, does a lot of sex trafficking, and we're heavily involved with that. We prepare meals, they go in and try to rescue a lot of these kids from the situations that they're in. So we just seen a lot of firsthand, a lot of families in bad situations. So hopefully this committee will be able to put forth some good strategies to help prevent at least a lot of those things from happening.
My name is Matt Taylor. Excuse me. I'm the pastor at Portland Nazarene Church, and I hope that I can lend my voice both as a pastor who works. Our church does a lot of work in Portland with those children that are suffering economically, and as well as really all economic classes, and hopefully I can represent them well and represent the church well, but also represent the northern part of our county up in Portland.
I know he's privilege of it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm Beverly Hyde. I'm a retired school counselor, so I've worked a lot with the course system, different agencies, including churches, over the years. And now as a grandmother, I have a passion for protecting children of all ages. And I hope to learn more from you all about what we have as far as agencies and what we're doing right now, and also to be able to prevent some of the things that we read about in the paper and see on the news. And so I'd like to be very active in that.
I'm Rick Duffer. I'm the principal at Westmoreland High School, and been in that position. This is my 14th year now, and I've seen things evolve to a certain extent over those 14 years. It seems as though our job has broadened, and we are filling a lot of the roles that were once filled by family members and things of that nature. The family that we once knew seems to be breaking to some degree, and we find ourselves filling the gap. And it sounds cliche, but it's so true. It takes a village, and everyone at this table has something to offer. We come together and we share those ideas, and we have a common good, and I think we do. We love children. I think we have a lot of answers that we can share with each other and hopefully implement to help children in some capacity.
Amy Cook. I am with Sumner County CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocate. It's been there for about 9 years. Prior to that, I was with Department of Children's Services for 10 years. So a social worker in our community, in our county for almost 20 years. Lived in Sumner County for over 30 years. Truly just have a heart for our community. Live here, work here, raising a 16-year-old here. All the things. Really invested in our school system and helping our educators and just really have a heart for protecting kids. Also familiar with working the resources we have in our community. Resource linkage is a huge part of what we do as CASA. Realizing, just the lack of resources when it comes to mental health, when it becomes, seeking providers covered by insurance, not covered by insurance, just all of those needs out there, and making sure that we all realize that's a huge struggle and could actually put more children at risk. And so just talking about those and trying to find those answers and working together for that.
I'm Judge David Howard. I am the juvenile court judge here for Sumner County. I have divorce court jurisdiction under my jurisdiction as General Sessions Division 2. But most people think of me, and I generally think of myself as the juvenile court judge. I've been in office now for over 6 years. Followed Judge Barry Brown after he retired. I was his magistrate for almost 17 years prior to that, and also prior to practicing law, I was a probation officer in juvenile court here in Sumner County as well. So this is an area that I have a lot of interest in, obviously, and I believe that it's things like this organization, I think that we can do some very good things to help children and families, because that's the interest certainly of the juvenile court. Now, I must be very candid on the front end, though, that there are certain things that I cannot discuss. Under Canon 3 of the Code of Judicial Conduct, I can discuss things about the law. Can't give legal advice, but I can talk about the law itself. I can talk about the things that we see in juvenile court here in Sumner County. I can tell you about things that my colleagues across the state report and see. But there are certain items that I cannot be involved in any discussions in. And I know Eric had already mentioned about having a vice or a co-chairman. That was certainly within my recommendation as well, in the case that there's any discussions that would be inappropriate for me to be involved in specifically. And I will let you know. I mean, I have a problem telling you I can't discuss this, and I will bow out. I certainly don't want that to be an issue, but I understand that a lot of folks maybe have difficulty understanding the rules that I have to follow, because anything that I say, sadly, is not spoken as David Howard. David Howard has his own opinions, but in any public forum, I am always speaking as Judge Howard, and the Board of Judicial Conduct assumes that I'm always speaking as Judge Howard, and is going to treat me as always speaking as him as well. So I wanted that to be on the front end, so if there's any issue that you hear me go, I can't talk about this and I don't need to be involved in this, it's certainly not been a slight against anybody's idea. It's just that simply I like to keep my law license. So all of you, I believe, have received the information when Chairman Hyde had contacted me about this and had sent me information from the resolution. I believe that all of you may have received this kind of documentation as well. So we sort of have an idea about what the commission is interested in. Now, that in some respects goes to what I was saying just a minute ago. There are some things that the commission is particularly interested in that I cannot really be involved in discussions in. But for those things that I can be, I would certainly like to know, what is it that interests you? When we're talking about a commission for the protection of children, I know that specifically there's talking about over-sexualization. I certainly think that's an issue. I think that one of the things that we see in juvenile court, I would dare say that pretty much anybody who's come to juvenile court is going to mention, we've seen the erosion of families, we've seen the erosion of conduct that precipitates then legal action. But when we're trying to talk about protection of children, what are we talking about? Are we talking about over-sexualization? Are we talking about human trafficking? Becca led the task force for that for part of the state. Are we talking about the breakdown of families? Are we talking about issues of trauma? Because those are the things that we see very often in the courthouse. We see trauma. And I know that the resolution specifically addresses and I think rightly so, kind of backs itself off of mental health issues as being a larger conversation. But is that a conversation that we at least need to have at some point when we're dealing with kids and families? Because we all know that trauma issues tends to be generational, and we're not erasing trauma here if we're fighting it over in another level. So for the purpose and scope of what we're doing, I guess I would open it up to the floor to see, what is it that interests you the most that this committee can do within the confines of the law, of course. Nobody be shy. Most of you don't strike me as shy retiring flowers. So.
I think as coming from a DCS standpoint, something that interests me is the additional resources that the committee can help maybe put into place. One thing that comes to mind immediately, just because I think it's easy to say we work with children as DCS, that's what everybody thinks. The reality is we work with adults. Kids are the easy part. We talk to kids every day, love kids. But the reality is we want to see the family itself be reunified. We want to see that these children are, when they go home, that they have a safe place to go and that they have longevity and stability. And a lot of times those resources are just not there. One thing that immediately comes to mind for me is parenting classes. Something so simple and so should be readily available to our community. It's just not. And so I would like to see, different resources that we can provide to our family, because the reality is any type of abuse, whether it's substance abuse, sex abuse, lack of supervision, any of these allegations, it has no prejudice. It can happen to any family. But we as a community have to do, I feel, a better job as ensuring that those resources for the families to reunify and to have longevity, stability are in place. And unfortunately, those resources just can be lacking in a lot of areas, especially with the more rural parts of our community.
Good. Anybody else?
And did I hear you say one of the things they leave outside this group is the mental health issues of children?
Well, that's one of the things that is mentioned in the addendum to the resolution, by saying that there is an understanding that children's mental health is a part of this, but it's a very large circumstance that perhaps that the commission or this committee itself is not specifically designed to address. Let me find that real quick.
The resolution.
Yes, it says threats, and I'm quoting from Exhibit A, quote, "Threats like our current mental health crisis, which according to the same TBI data is a larger threat to our kids than this resolution addresses." But I think it's something that has to be mentioned, even if we're not going to tackle the issues of mental health head on. I think that we would be remiss in acting like it doesn't. We got counselor.
Affect everything else.
Yes, you know, most of the people at this table have counseled in some respect, whether you know it or not. You have. Many of you are, as pastors, are counseling your parishioners daily. As Mr. Duffer, you're counseling the students and teachers under your charge. You know, Ms. Hyde, you were actively hands-on. You know, Dr. Cleek is hands-on. Logan is counseling in a perhaps a different way, but it's still happening. Becca and Amy are, so we're all dealing with these issues that mental health is important, and it's certainly something that we see. And I hope that the next time we meet that we'll be able to share a greater amount of data from some public sources to demonstrate. One of the things that we do is for any child who comes before the court for a delinquent offense, and the delinquent offense would be a criminal offense if it were an adult. So Ms. Hyde can be charged with theft, just like my 9-year-old son can be. But a child who comes before the court for those offenses, on the back end, we do what's called a needs and risk assessment on. So if a child's placed on probation, their probation officer does it. If a child is given a diversion path, then one of our staff performs this needs and risk assessment, and they gauge it. I mean, and the data then is translated over to Vanderbilt's Center for Excellence, and they have been compiling this data now for a number of years. That started with the Juvenile Justice Reform Act of 2019, and so they compile this, and so each county is supposed to compile this, do these assessments, and then translate this data, and we can track what we're seeing, as well. Actually, the administrative office of the court tracks this data. And one of the things that I think that when we present it to you next month, one of the things you're going to see is that it's consistent trauma and it's consistent mental health. I mean, over and over again. And that's not just Sumner County. That's the counties that we're seeing. For example, my colleague in Madison County, where we do everything on the back end of cases, Judge Little does everything on the front end of cases. And they track everything, and so their report data is the highest in the state because they're addressing every child that's seen. And so if you've got Madison County, we are, however, consistently within like the top 4 counties that are reporting, and based upon what it is we're seeing, and this, it keeps showing up time and time again. So I think that, at least my opinion, we would be somewhat remiss to at least not think about mental health in the greater scheme, even if our charge is not directly to address it, because I think it's a conversation that goes far beyond Sumner County. But
Is the focus more on children or on the adults?
I get the impression that it focuses on children, but
Not the parents of children.
But I think that again, if we're going to talk about the protection of children, I think we've got to think about adults as well. But someone may have a disagreement with that, and that's certainly fine. Yeah, trust me, I don't want to turn this into the David Howard show.
I like to think of it that when we talk about trauma, we are hopefully going to stop the cycle. And this cycle and the generational cycle of abuse and trauma is what we see in the revolving door of juvenile court and the cases and generations. It is hard to believe that I now see parents and grandparents that I worked with, and that it just repeats itself. And so when I think of protecting children, I hope that it is actually stopping the cycle. And how can we, as a community, put those resources in place so that we can at least, help that one. We know we can't help them all, but that we can at least, everyone asks us all the time, how do you do what we do? And you have to continue to do what you do because you did just help one, because we hear a lot of negative. And I think if we put it in place that, we make it where the resources is there for them, for that parenting class where they learned about stopping, the cycle and knowing that you don't have to raise your kids the way that you were raised and the abuse that you endured because you thought that was discipline. And so that they then parent their 2-year-old differently. And so they don't get a CPS referral and the children don't get removed, just very simple things. And that's the biggest thing I can think of.
And maybe it will be helpful in one respect is to, I just generally assume everybody knows what it is that I do on a daily basis. And that's probably not a fair statement to make. But the process, maybe we should brief an outline for those folks who've not really had a lot of experience in juvenile court. The process begins with the filing of a petition. So a petition operates like a complaint would in the adult system. So in this case, where Becca and her team with Child Protective Services begins an investigation based upon reported allegations of child abuse. Now that could be a wide gamut, and it could be environmental neglect, it could be drug exposure, it could be child sexual abuse, it could be child physical abuse. It's a wide net that's cast. But if the determination is made by CPS, they consult with their lawyer, and we have a lawyer assigned to Sumner County, works for the department, and a petition is filed, and then we come to court. And if a child is removed into state's custody, which can be done prior to a hearing based upon emergency circumstances, and I've done that many times, then we have a hearing within 72 hours. And that's a time frame that's set because it's designed to try to find out what's going on quickly so that we're always thinking best interest and we're thinking permanency for this kid. And we're also thinking about the constitutional protections afforded their parents. Parenting is a constitutionally protected right. It's considered a fundamental liberty interest. So we have a hearing, and then it is a probable cause-based hearing. It's called a preliminary hearing. And if we find sufficient probable cause, then we move the case and services can be worked by the department. This is sort of generally where Logan and Amy votes may come in because the child is entitled to an attorney, which is called a guardian ad litem, and that guardian represents the best interest of the child. The parents are entitled to counsel as well, not only biological or adoptive parents. If grandmother or aunt or uncle had custody, they can have an attorney, but there's no requirement there to be appointed one. But Logan may represent a parent in one case, she may represent a child in another case. And we're always thinking what is really going to be best. Reunification is what we're thinking about on the front end. We're looking at, can this child be safely returned to their home? And if they can't be, then what is the best alternative for them? And we have a hearing like any other. There's no jury or anything like that, but it's a trial. The burden of proof for the state of Tennessee is high. It's called clear and convincing evidence. It's the highest civil standard that we have in Tennessee. And they put on witnesses, and then if there is adjudication that's been done, then we move on to what's called a dispositional hearing, and we sort of move from the what happened to what's going to happen. Sort of what are we looking at doing here? And again, all through this unless we're talking about significant abuse, is the notion that hopefully the child is going to be able to return home. to their mom, dad, or both. But how do we do that safely? So I think that it's important to realize that there is a whole process that has to be gone through as we move through this. And we have very specific laws in Tennessee as it relates to juveniles about what can be done and what can't be done, and all the law is constantly changing. We still, and that's where I think that the role of folks like Amy and Logan and Becca and all of y'all is, as community people and non-lawyers, look at it and go, what is acceptable and what's not acceptable? What can we do? What is, as a community, what can we do to help, as Amy indicated, breaking cycles of trauma and that kind of thing? And many of you sit in a very informed position to affect a lot of people very quickly, and I think that's a great thing.
What percentage of the children that appear before you end up going back to their parents and going home?
Oh gosh, I'd say it's still pretty high. I mean, it may take a while. I mean, there's nothing about juvenile court's a weird thing, because all of a sudden we move fast until we don't. And then when we don't move fast, we don't move fast. But a lot of times what we're waiting on is for people to have services. So if mom or dad has a drug problem, we want them to address that drug problem. But we also, and I know that it's going to take more than just a few days to become sober. You want that demonstration of sobriety moving forward. And I will tell you, it's an amazing thing to see it work when you have a parent who you would never guess is going to get it done, and when they come back and they're sober and they look good and they worked hard because they want to get their child. And
The power of getting the child
yeah,
back.
some, I mean, that's the drive. And some will tell you that that's what they want to do, but then these are the people that you're still a year in on, waiting for them to consistently pass a drug screen, or you're encouraging them all this time to buy in, and to, it's a hard thing to do, to tell somebody your kid's not coming home. But, and it's also a hard thing to tell them, if there's a time to be selfish, right now is the time to be selfish, for you to work on you, so that your child is waiting at the end. And we've seen some remarkable turnarounds before. Very remarkable.
Judge Howard, I think the beauty of the diversity at this table is that everyone sees things differently, and we all have a different perspective. Every child that is broken or being broken is not necessarily violating a law.
Amen.
Okay? We see it all the time. And one of the things that I say to my teachers, one of the things that I say to my students, is that Westmoreland High School, for some of you, may be the best place in this world for you. It very well may be. And if it is, I certainly want to do everything within my power, and I encourage the teachers at Westmoreland High School to do that same thing. And we want it to be a place that students want to be. They want to be there. Every morning when students arrive, some students are brought to school by their parents, some get off buses. An adult in that building speaks to them, smiles at them, and makes contact with them. And that creates a place that they want to be. The bane of our existence today, and why we can't find a solution to this, social media. Students will read things on social media, they'll see it, and it absolutely destroys and breaks them. And social media can do something to a child that 10 adults with a culminated 40 years of college can't fix. I wish, and I've read something over this past weekend, and it was a study where schools and school systems were looking at making certain parts of the school no media zones, no social media, no electronic devices within that. And they said it was amazing the results that they were getting and the upbeat change that they were seeing in students. I don't know that in my case we can identify a child and necessarily fix the parent, and you deal with that in juvenile court, and that is our goal. But if we can't back up and fix the parent, how do we at least stop the cycle and convince the child, if you don't like the environment that you dwell in, that your parents are creating, do something differently. And that's the message that we try to send through a variety of ways.
Sure, I think positivity is always going to be a good thing, and it's a sad state of affairs, and I've said many times I feel that sometimes the only affirmation they get is from somebody who's passing down judgment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're telling this kid that you're worth more than what this demonstration is, or even a parent, you're better than these circumstances. You're better than this. So, but I think that's a good point.
And I do love that you mentioned the social media aspect, because I think for the majority of us adults, I mean, I still think of myself pretty young, but I graduated in 2006, and the reality is I didn't have social media.
Mm-hmm.
And so to think about the things that are just readily accessible right there for kids, especially when parents just don't understand. They don't understand, like, oh, you should have parental controls on these little things. So it's not just of what can harm them by what people say, but I know there was some mention of like sex trafficking. And I will say, by being on the human trafficking team in our county, in our state rather, our county isn't directly affected by human trafficking itself that highly. The number one cause of abuse in our county really is substance abuse. And I would say the number 2 amount of referrals that we get in DCS in Sumner County is sex abuse. A lot of those do come from social media sites where, because we have these little devices that are readily accessible, and parents honestly just have a lack of understanding of what these apps are on the phone. They don't know, oh, my kid shouldn't be on TikTok or shouldn't be on the site. My 11-year-old shouldn't have full access to all these apps. And so you get a child who's curious, or who's just a kid and just doesn't think things through, to be honest. And somebody asks them for, oh, can you send me a picture? And that little picture turns into a lot of pictures, and suddenly this young 11-year-old child has now sent nude photos to an adult male that they didn't even know they were talking to. That does happen. And so the social media aspect of, when you're talking about what you mentioned, is so broad, and it is not something that one person can fix. But I do feel like, educating parents consistently is key in that. And we've seen success. We've seen where they've gone in and we've really tried to educate parents, and they had no idea that they could even put parental controls on the phone, which blows my mind, that they didn't know that. But just those little education pieces, and maybe that could be something on the front end in the school. I don't know how that could play out, but I do think that there's ways that we can educate parents on how to protect their kids when it comes to these little devices.
We do that very thing at the beginning of school. We do it periodically through the school year, and we say to students, be wise, be aware, be informed, understand. If it goes out there, it's like hairspray out of a can. You can't put it back in. I don't care what you do. You can delete, you can do this. If it's out there in cyberspace, it's out there. And you're right. I don't know how you convince, for me, a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old girl, okay, I love this guy. He's asking me to do these things. I don't feel good about it, but I'm going to send him nude pics of me. And then they break up, and what does he do? He uses those as leverage against her to do things that no one should be asked to do. But it's there. And we say, we get on the front end, and we look forward to hypotheticals. If you break up, and statistics say you're going to break up, he's going to use these, or she's going to use these in a very adverse, ugly, spiteful way against you. Don't do it. If someone truly loves you, they're not ever going to ask you to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable. So just don't do it. And we try to say these things before they happen. If we say it post facto, the damage has already been done. So you're right, educating parents, but also educating the kids to know there's potential damage here, stay away from it.
Now, sorry if you mentioned the name of a book that addresses both of these issues. It's called The Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. And Jonathan Hyatt answers the question how to address exactly what you're talking about, and gives 4 solutions. And I'd recommend it. It's a great read for people that want to know how to deal with social media.
And what's the name of the author again, Doctor?
His name is Jonathan, Jonathan, Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. It's kind of a long title. But he says in 2010, there were only about 15% of people were on social media. By 2015, 80% of children were on social media. So in just 5 short years, that's when childhood was rewired into something that we don't like,
Okay.
an adverse effect.
You know, that may be, just listening to you all, one of the things that we do want to look at as a committee, come up with some ideas where we could help with some preventive programs, working with the schools, working with the churches. I know when I was a school counselor, one of my biggest problems was, I was a middle school counselor, was these kids going home. We didn't have all of this that we've got now, but they were going home and no one was there. And that's when they got into a lot of trouble. Well, now, these kids do still go home to an empty house, but they also have the internet and all of the other things that we're seeing that's just so negative. And maybe we could look at some things that other counties or other places have done to set up programs with the community working together to give these kids or these parenting programs, or giving the kids some activities. I know our church at one point opened up our gym so kids could come in for free time with parental supervision, but it's just an idea of maybe that's one of the things that we could do as a committee.
I was going to mention something similarly that Becca touched on, access to resources, and Amy touched on that CASA has a lot of access to different resources that people don't necessarily know about, and that's something that I see from the point of representing the parent, that I think a lot of times parents are afraid to admit that there's food insecurity. I think that they are afraid to talk about the fact that, their teen care lapsed, and that I think that there is a big kind of misjudgment of the Department of Children's Services, in that, there's a lot of these things going around that, DCS wants to take your kids away. They get public funding for every kid that's in state's custody. I hear that all the time. But I think that there are a lot of parents that are afraid to admit that there is a problem going on and to ask for that help. So I think that within the members that are sitting at this table, that, if we can put, that word out into the community, that, if you're having food insecurity, here are the places that are giving away food baskets on these days. Here, if your teen care lapses, here's who to call to work on getting it set back up. If you're having a mental health crisis, this is who you call before it gets to the point that, the police are showing up at your door and someone's snatching your kids away. Or, if you think you're experiencing a mental health crisis, here are the steps to follow. But that's something that I've noticed in talking to the parents, is that it's not, I don't think that all of their issues are something that could not have been addressed ahead of time. It's something that they let build and build and build and build until DCS got involved, because they didn't know who to go to, they didn't know how to get the help, and it's gotten so bad that now, the court's involved and all those things. So I think that there is a lot that could be done for those preventative measures to let people know of all of these resources and things that are available to help break that cycle, because I think a lot of that comes into
Sure.
the environmental issues as well, that they were maybe, I see it frequently that people were raised in a nasty house, they were raised with a hoarder, so that's what they think is acceptable to them. So trying to, like Amy said, teach people that's not normal, but here's who can help you.
And to piggyback off of that, just for those that don't know, DCS doesn't only go out and investigate allegations of abuse and neglect, but there is such a thing called resource linkage, that when you make a referral, if the only concern is they don't have food, or there's concerns for their lights are gonna get shut off, or any kind of just need like that, it goes to resource leakage rather than to CPS, and resource leakage literally just links up with that family and helps provide them with whatever resource in the community that's available to get them back on their feet and to help, give them that stability that they need.
Can I interject something real quick? I apologize. When I've dealt with committees, especially new committees in the past, every now and then somebody will bring this up, and I think it's a great idea, is you don't want to reinvent the wheel here. And there are probably counties that are operating under committee names that are the same or very similar to this. And it might be worth your time to reach out to some that have been out for some time and say, how are you doing it? What kind of information are you giving out? And start compiling that stuff together. Sure. And it might help you direction and focus what this committee can do versus overlapping with other agencies and stuff like that are already performing that duty. But I just throw that out there as a piece of advice.
Trevor, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm going back, I keep going back and reading the Exhibit A on the original document we got, and it's talking about are we able to get, because it keeps referencing back to the TBI data. I'm assuming there's some report that drove all of this.
The way I read it, much like you, I read the same thing. I think that, it's publicly acquired data. I think we should be able to get a copy.
I just didn't know if there was a report. It'd be interesting to see it, to see what's driving all of this, because when you read it, it's a huge scope and a lot of generalizations. I'm like, okay, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
Well, I just try to wrap my mind around it. I'm like, why are they, doing this? And I was also thinking, just listen to all the conversations, and I've got kids in school, hear all the same stuff. Hey, Dad, there's this girl, there's whatever, did you know? And I hear all those stories, and I'm like, how did that happen? Then they tell me about their family. I'm like, okay, I can see how that would happen. So, I start going that road. I'm like, okay, could be a lot of preventive measures, and I'm thinking about what Mr. Silver's saying, and one of those that does that is the Rescue One. Lady goes to our church, she works there. They do a lot of training on the front end to a lot of these kids, and there was in fact, I know a parent. It was their nephew a couple years ago. The boy was 15. Got to chatting online with some guy up in Chicago. The day he turns 18, he's gone. And you're like, how could you have stopped that? A lot of that stuff goes on, and so they. I'm not saying they have to do it. I'm not trying to refer them. I'm just saying they come in on the front end and say, look, tell the kids, stay away from these sorts of things. It doesn't prevent everything. Yeah. The second question I had was, when people come, and I'm not as familiar with the legal aspect of it, once people get into that system, what are all the sort of avenues that you direct them to? You see an at-risk child that would be in this. How does that work with what the court's doing to say, we're going to make you go here, that would prevent some of these things?
Sure. When we're dealing with a kid, let's say we'll bring in our hypothetical child for delinquent activity. So one of the things that we're doing is that we do our best to try to tailor what is happening on the back end to what the general facts are. So if we're dealing with issues of let's say drug-related matters. So alcohol and drug assessments are going to be a big deal. We're going to make sure that assessment is done. We're going to have them, if there's recommendations made from that assessment, whether it's a outpatient program or something like that, then we're going to see that those recommendations are followed. If there are, I'm a big proponent of therapy, so, if we're looking going, well, maybe this child needs a mental health assessment. So much of this is then if a child's placed on probation, if I put Rick on probation, then his probation officer is going to be making sure that Rick is not only just checking all the boxes that's necessary for his probation, but making sure that, are you going to counseling? Because Rick may go to counseling and just sit there. Now that's not going to be helpful for anybody, But the hope is that you are giving the family and this kid pathways to go down. And we have a wide variety of things that we refer to. And next time I will bring in a copy of some of the things that we refer children to, so that way you can see the types of programs. And COVID was both a great thing for the juvenile court and a horrible thing for the juvenile court. But one thing we were able to do is we were able to pivot. And we were able to find, and one of my assistants, she spent hours going through finding online classes while we're doing cases by Zoom. You know, you're not going to have 50 kids coming to the courthouse to take some alcohol and drug class, but we're able to do some online classes and vet these online classes that we found to be good fits for people.
I don't know, maybe somebody has, do we have like a flow chart, a skeleton of something, you know? I guess going back to what it's talking about, preventing the over-sexualization of children, to say, hey, here's, currently if they get in the system, here's, or is it just way too big to even?
It's pretty big because you're trying everything to be unique.
Yeah.
So Rick's case may not be the same thing as Ray's case. So they may be charged with very similar things, but their own circumstances may have created a situation. And a lot of times that situation can even be diffused, because if the parents are very proactive here and they're coming to court saying, and I had one not in the far distant past, they came to court and they're like, we've got him in counseling and we're doing this, and after a while you're going, I don't know if there's anything else I can do. I mean, you've taken care of it. The beautiful thing about the law in juvenile court is that I have to find that the child is in need of treatment and rehabilitation. That's the finding for delinquency. If I see that, for example, Rick's parents have already taken care of X, Y, and Z, and I go, I don't know if there's anything else I can really do here that's going to benefit him, I can terminate that case and say, he's already receiving treatment and rehabilitation, so the services of juvenile court are not required in this. And so that's a rarity, because after all, look at him, you know, he's up to no good. But it's a possibility. So we'll bring in all of the stuff that we have to sort of show everybody sort of what it is that we can refer to, and various agencies that all of us work with. There's a lot of agencies that satellite around the court. Some are very successful, some are not as successful. But we see this, it's really the staying power. What agencies are staying around are the ones I think that you can really depend on. Tennessee Voices, for example, is one.
So I guess my question really is what are we doing? I guess that would be, what is it we're doing? Because you don't want to just start throwing things, you know, I have no idea what we're doing. So it's hard to wrap your mind around what would be the next possibility then.
So I think that's sort of leads us into the one thing that we need to think about between now and our next time is really what are we going to do? Where do we go from here? And I'm happy to bring in copies of things, like I said, that we're seeing in juvenile court, the kind of services that we're able to provide for kids. I can bring in some of the data that's been collected, demonstrating sort of areas that at least statewide and countywide that we're kind of seeing as well. And then it's sort of a matter of deciding where you want to go, you know. And again, it may not be a journey that I can take with you, but if nothing else, I'm happy to get us all in the same room and talking about it and then making the decision. But you know, I think we'd be remiss in making that decision right now without more. But as much as anything else, I wanted to have this as an introduction for us to meet and to understand sort of who everybody is and at various points along the community, because the very fact that you're sitting here is important. That y'all chose, you were asked to do this, and you know that you chose to be here, because most of the side of this table could have told me no, very easily. But the very fact that you're here and want to do something to protect children, I think is very worthwhile. And so,
I notice it says here, make recommendations to all of our governing bodies in our county to address threats to our children. So our mandate is to address the threats.
So
period, right?
I think one could extrapolate it to be that. So I think this is a good start for things to be thinking about, because I think we're all sort of orbiting around the same area. So we need to really talk about scheduling meetings, and then as Mr. Sittler pointed out, we need to establish, I've got it on there for election of other officers, but I think we need to establish what our chair and what our vice chair in particular look like. And I will be the first. Mr. Heidi called me about being involved in this, and I was happy to do it, but if you as a body wish to proceed with someone else's chair, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I've been consulted by better people. I held a flashlight for my dad, so you know.
I move to keep his chair.
All right, so moving then to who would like to serve as vice chair on the times where either I am not available or if the conversation turns.
We actually need a motion in
Okay.
a second and to vote on that. I apologize.
No, you're fine. So I guess, do we have a motion for nominations for chair?
I move that the judge be elected as chair of the committee.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, that motion carries. For vice chair, do we have any nominations, or does anybody want to volunteer? And again, don't everybody speak at once. Okay, so, all right. Becca has volunteered. Do we have a motion to accept her as vice chair?
So moved.
All right,
Second.
and
Yeah.
second?
Yeah.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposition? All right, vice chair then is selected as well. The committee itself has really, it's a pretty wide open time frame. It's really, I think that the resolution talks about it sort of being during the action of this presently sitting commission. So that's going to give us effectively 2 years. And I know that we can't go on and on forever, and at some point, as it was pointed out by Reverend Jackson, we've got to decide what we're going to do, and then at some point, as Dr. Cleveland indicated, we're also going to have to come down and go, this is what we're doing, and this is what the recommendation will be. But I think for at least a while, we need to inspect some of the data. I think, as Reverend Jackson requested some data, and I think we need to provide that. I think we need to get it so all of us can be conversant with it. We will provide you anything that we can publicly provide you from juvenile court as well. But what kind of meeting schedule would y'all like to start with as we begin to absorb our charge?
Is there any way to email the data before we come to the next
Yes,
meeting? So
yeah.
we can read that?
What we'll do is that, as Eric pointed out, everything that will be brought to the meeting will be published on or openly. But I'll be happy to provide anybody. So if you'll, before you leave us tonight, if you'll make sure that we get your email addresses, and we will email you all of the documents that would be then publicly disseminated for the purposes of our committee.
And you can just forward that to my attention, and I'll make sure it gets
Okay,
posted
great.
along with the notices.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. So we'll get that together. When would y'all like to meet again? I will tell you, May, obviously is right around the cusp of May. We have a courthouse move. At the
Allegedly.
I'm going more than allegedly now. We have a courthouse move at the end of May for a couple weeks, and then we're going to be getting acclimated, but I would probably come close to recommending June. I understand that people have got vacations and stuff and want to be as flexible as we can, but if anybody has any ideas for meeting, I'm happy to entertain.
I already took my vacation, so
All right,
I'm
good,
like-
you're in.
I have 2 weeks off in June, but I'm available the 2 middle weeks.
Okay.
Do you want to do the meetings month by month, or do you want to set a third
It's up to y'all,
Tuesday
how you
of
wanna do it.
every month, or
Well,
it's
Monthly, probably, is that what we're saying?
Sir?
Monthly,
Mhm.
and I'm saying like third Tuesday.
Yeah, that's what
or-
Eric's thinking, like the
yeah.
third Tuesday of the month.
Yeah, whatever y'all decide on, I'm
Regular.
just, sometimes it helps having a fixed on the calendar.
Does that work?
Tuesday.
All right, like third Tuesday of each month? Yeah.
Beginning,
And that'll
June.
begin June 18th, 6 PM. Is 6 PM a good time for everybody? All right. Hopefully, we're at an hour. I'd like to keep us somewhere about an hour because I know that everybody's got other things that they need to do and lives to lead, so. So we'll plan for that then. Third Tuesday, beginning June the 18th. Before y'all leave, Alan Hickey is with my office. We can get your email addresses so that way that we'll email you reminders. You got my formal letter, but
you will need a minute taker.
yeah.
Is he gonna continue to do that, or do you gonna? The reason I ask is there are people here that will do it, within the county building that do other committees. You can reach out, or maybe call, Ms. Templeton
Okay.
and, see if she's got a list of people that do that, if it helps you any.
All right. Well, for
And-
tonight's
'cause those will
meeting,
need to be a part of
Yeah.
each subsequent meeting.
yeah, for tonight's meeting, my office will do the minutes.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
One last thing to motion.
Yep. So with nothing else, then have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
All right,
Second.
all right, all right. So not gonna take that there's any opposition to adjournment, otherwise we're gonna be here for a long, long time. Sorry. So the meeting will be adjourned. Thank y'all very much.